Hello and welcome along to the Westminster Roundup from the Sport and Recreation Alliance. I'm your host, Alex Sexton. Pleased again to be joined by the Alliance's Public Affairs lead, Ryan McCulloch. How are you, Ryan?
Good morning, Alex. I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, we're getting through. We're recording this on the first day of the second lockdown, and it has been a busy week for everybody in the sector as we battle through what the new restrictions will have on us. So let's crack straight into that, Ryan. It has been an incredibly busy week in Westminster, culminating in a debate in Parliament yesterday. Tell us, where do we lie?
Well, it's a busy week in Westminster, as you say, Alex, when you see Boris Johnson more than once in a week for the usual PMQs. So obviously, I think his original intention was to announce the lockdown this week through Parliament, but it was leaked in the media on Saturday. So he gave the statement on Saturday announcing the lockdown details, and then he gave a statement to Parliament on Monday. And there was the debate on those measures yesterday. Despite some Conservative opposition to those measures, Labour supported it, and therefore it passed quite easily on Wednesday night. So as you say, we're recording this on the first day of lockdown. We've been through this before, right? So we're back there. It's similar. It's not quite as strict as the first lockdown, but essentially the advice is to stay at home. If you can work from home, work from home. The only reasons you should be leaving are for work, for exercise, and for caring responsibilities, various caring responsibilities in different situations. You can, as I said, the key one for us is exercise outside within your household or support bubble, or with one person from another household. Essentially, that is the crux of the exercise issue. Unfortunately, as we know, grassroots sport is being closed below any elite level across the country for the month, and understand the huge frustration that has had for a number of members. And we will do our best to try and support them, but there is help available out there from the government for some of this.
And all of that information is sat on our website, the latest government guidance. So please do head to the Sport and Recreation Alliance website to check out the very latest on that. One question we know that we've had come in is support for self-employed staff and workers in the sector out there. What have the government announced for that, Ryan?
Yeah, so actually, the furlough scheme's been extended twice in the last 4 days because this morning at time recording, they extended it again until the end of December. So the 80% furlough scheme that we've had in place since mid-March now, or the end of March, that the Chancellor announced in the first lockdown, is going to stay in place because obviously we're seeing huge shutdowns of not only our sector but other sectors as well, and lots of people who won't be able to work for a month. The government are making the self-employed support scheme more generous. It was at 40% of profits over as percentage of money made. They're now bringing that into line with the furlough scheme, and that's going to be 80% of profits made above a certain threshold. So in some ways that will be good for those who are self-employed in our sector if they make a certain amount, if coaches, etc., and also for those sports clubs that have to close. The furlough scheme is there. I think it's ever so slightly different this time. I think I'm right in saying in that pension contributions and some of the income tax stuff will have to be paid by an employer this time, where it wasn't in the past, but the scheme itself still pays 80% of the salary. So ever so slightly different. It will be ever so slightly less generous for that reason. But those schemes are still going to run there until at least the end of December.
But broadly good news that there are some measures of support in there for workers in the sector. We'll touch upon a little bit later while we consider it's not that wholesale support that is needed, because there are requirements across both of those schemes. But as mentioned, we'll come back to that one a little bit later. Quickly touching upon that shutdown you referenced, Ryan, and the fact that the sector has shut down. We've seen a lot of noise this week in the media as our members and the gym sector come out to try to keep COVID-secure sports and easily distanced sports open, but with not much success. Can you give a bit of insight into why government haven't granted that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to make, because as you say, you've given the good examples there. We saw, golf, tennis, gyms, all wanted to stay open because they effectively can say that we seem to be fairly, coronavirus, COVID-19 secure. Ultimately, I think it's a political decision because Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance, the Chief Scientific Officer and the Chief Medical Officer, were in front of the Health Select Committee earlier in the week. And they said that they did not advise government in the shutdown of grassroots sport. So it is a political decision that's been made by number 10. And I understand how hugely frustrating it is for members. It's a much shorter lockdown than the first lockdown, we hope. But I think the reasoning for it, if I can try and give any clarity from a government perspective, is that while it would seem sensible to open golf courses because you can, I saw Darren Goff on TalkSport saying I can walk around the golf course because it's a public right of way, but if I put my clubs on my back, I'm going to get fined. So I understand the point around something like golf and even tennis, but the government has to have a much more broad brush look at this than everybody else. So if they say, well, golf courses can open, but even within our sector, but another area can't, it's even harder to justify. And they've got the added kind of, they have the broad brush spectrum. So they have other sectors. I've seen outdoor theatres saying, can we stay open and have socially distant performances? It's perfectly safe to be outdoors and do so. And I think the government want this idea that everybody is in this lockdown together. Completely understand that we have to make the case for the benefits of sport and physical activity on health and mental health, even as it relates to COVID, but just generally speaking. But I think in terms of how a government makes policy, it's difficult to have that nuance. And the government, it's easier for the government to manage to say, we need to shut everything down. Because if you open things up, you kind of open up the potential for other loopholes where people could do things that, circumvent the rules in one other way. So not here to defend the government in any way. I would love to see our sector open. But if it helps to clarify from a member's point of view, the reasoning, that's why, if that makes sense.
So that's some really useful context to that blanket ban approach as it has been and the reasons behind that. And I think we're very understanding as a sector and as a membership that we are in the midst of a public health crisis and we all need to do what we can to support that. But I guess this increases the importance of what we've been calling for, along with our friends at UK Active, for a sports recovery fund, and to make sure that actually as a sector we have proven that we are, for the majority, COVID secure, and that once this lockdown ends, we must be able to be in a position where we can reopen our doors and welcome back communities from December 3rd or from whenever it is that we can start taking back to the pitches, courts, dance halls and everything else. So that's why we have started pushing the Sports Recovery Fund campaign and the Save Our Sports campaign out there. Ryan, can you just touch upon a little bit more about why this is so essential and how that will help the sector to survive?
Yeah, well, you put it pretty well yourself there, Alex. I think, the reason I made the point about the lockdown just now and the government's decision is that, as we saw from the campaigns for the gyms and golf, the government are not moving on that. So, if I was going to offer any advice, it would be, yes, if we think we can make the government move, do so. But that law is now passed. So in terms of how we expend our energy going forward, we're in another lockdown period. We know the effects this is going to have on clubs, incomes, on their staff, on their revenues, on everything, and on the participation and activity levels in their sports. So we need to make sure that while, now that we're in the lockdown period and it looks like we're going to be in a lockdown, the government aren't going to change their minds on that. We need to, it's the renewal, as you say, afterwards, and how we manage that. So it's making sure that the sports sector gets the support it deserves from government. And that is what the Save Our Sports campaign is all about. And as you say, we've got the petition going, that is now live. And one thing that members can really do to try and help us push that and have the sector prepared for the post-lockdown period is to share that among all your networks, members, social media. It's doing quite well. We've got 20,000 signatures on there, and it's a UK Parliament petition. So when you get to 10,000, you get a response from government. So we will get a written response in the form of a letter. We publish on the petitions website with the government's approach to what they think they could do to support the sector in relation to the ask we've got in the petition. We really, really want to get to 100,000 because that gets us a chance to be considered for a debate in Westminster Hall. And that's where you start, hopefully, using those parliamentary mechanisms to really push this with government. So it's doing well, as I say. We have, in modern parlance, it's one of the top 3 trending petitions that has been since we launched it on the UK petitions website. We're getting sort of 300-400 signatures now, which is great. As I say, we're at just around about 20,000 now. But we really need that 100,000. So if people can push it, members, their clubs, individuals on social media, sign it, get your mum, dad, brother, sister, dog to sign it. We just need to get to that 100,000 and beyond to show the weight of support behind this that our sector needs.
And that's the crucial part to this. It is that weight of support and how important this is for the sector as a whole.
Yeah.
And if you want more information, take a look at the Sport and Recreation Alliance website. Again, it's got all of our calls on there. It mentions tax relief. It mentions a sports recovery fund, which we want to keep the sector doors open when we can reopen. And it talks about facilities. So 3 core asks to really protect us moving forward. As Ryan mentioned, it's only been open for a few days, already 20,000 signatures, which is fantastic to see. But yeah, let's share this. If you've got any high profile athletes that can share the message as well. And if you need some support in creating some text or you need graphics, we've got a downloadable toolkit online as well. So it's all pre-written for you. All you need to do is spread that message, and fingers crossed we'll reach that 100,000 very shortly, and we can have that debate in Parliament and hopefully put some more pressure on government to protect our sector much in the way they have done the arts and culture sector. So it'd be great to also receive that support and funding. Speaking of lockdown and of our members and the increased activity and questions we want answering, the Youth Sport Trust have been very vocal this week, quite rightly so, in protecting childhood activity and activity in schools which will remain open. What's the latest on that, Ryan?
Yeah, so you rightly mentioned our friends at the Youth Sport Trust, and then they're calling for clarity on the point around extracurricular sport. So sport in schools can continue, PE, physical, education in the school day. But at least at the time of recording, there is yet to be clarity from government on whether, your inter-schools teams can play, or your tennis clubs or whatever after school can continue when they're outside of the school day. And the Youth Sport Trust are really pushing hard for that. They're making the case to the government for the importance of youth sport on both physical and mental health of our young people. And it ties into some wider stuff that's going on generally about grassroots sport for kids outside of schools as well. So they're sort of 2 slightly separate campaigns, but they're running side by side. And it seems to be doing quite well. It's got high profile individuals, high profile former athletes, Robbie Savage, Michael Vaughan, plenty of others, talking about the importance of children and young people's mental and physical health. And it's been particularly it's been framed in the idea that we could be looking at a mental health crisis for a generation, which I don't think is too dramatic, to be honest. So worth mentioning that both of those campaigns are out there, and all members, as we do, would support those, I think. So if you want to support those, it's worth looking at.
And it's a very good point you touch upon around activity levels amongst different demographics and different groups. I've been fortunate enough to speak to a lot of our members this week. I know that England Boxing have shared some stories recently about how some Sport England funding from earlier in the year have kept the doors open at their boxing gyms around the country, and without further support, they risk closure. I've caught up with Bowls England, who have told me the amazing work that their clubs do in keeping an older demographic connected and away from isolation, improving their mental health. And again, a large number of clubs at risk of closing their doors. So it's intergenerational, it's for every community. And that's why it's so crucial that grassroots activity is kept safe and well funded for the good and the benefit of the physical and mental health of the nation moving forward. We could not push any stronger on this message and just how important this is for the nation's recovery from this pandemic. We're understanding of the situation, but we want to be there to offer a solution for the nation moving forward. And the great work from our friends at Youth Sport Trust, UK Active, and all of our members out there, we're seeing some inspirational, wonderful stuff from our members. So hopefully we can keep that support and momentum up as we move forward over the next few weeks. But speaking of wanting questions answered, that draws us into one more avenue that we have to speak with government, and that's the DCMS Select Committee inquiry, which I believe the deadline for submissions is next week. If any of our members haven't yet submitted evidence, Ryan, how do they do it, and why is it so important they do so?
I'll take the second question first. I think, again, you've just outlined really well there why it's important. And it's quite interesting you mentioned England Boxing, because they've shared some research with me as well in advance of our own submission, around what support, as you said, what support schemes have been there to help, the plight of clubs now, what it looks like in the future. And I think that's the key point for any and all of our members that are going to respond or want to respond, is to show the journey that your sport has been through in the last 8, 9, 10 months, and where you realistically possibly see the future of that being. So I spoke with the Select Committee clerk, and she said that obviously the the select committee is split into three things that they're asking for. Governance in sport, which I think will be heavily football focused. We've seen a lot of the debate around football governance. What can be done for grassroots and community sport going forward? That's the key bit for us. And the final bit about whether elite level sport should do more to support, I should say, grassroots sport. So our submission is going to touch on the first and third ask, but focus really heavily on the grassroots sport ask. And it's a vital mechanism to get the committee to say to government the things we've been saying and the things you and I have talked about. So from our side, we'll be pushing a lot of the messaging from our Save Our Sports campaign around the need for this in the sector. What we really want, and members can help with this, and this is a sort of direct plea now. As I said, England Boxing have been fantastic already, but if there are any members who can share some really useful, strong evidence on the plight of their organisation or their clubs, and also how this, as you mentioned, Alex, the schemes that were launched in March have kept clubs open, and how we will need some financial support post this lockdown for the same reason. That's what we really want to evidence to the committee. And it's a vital tool to do it, as I say, because they will report and government must respond to that report. So it's another iron in the fire in terms of trying to get our sector to be kind of fit for the future, if you like.
And when's the deadline for those submissions, Ryan?
Oh, sorry, yeah, that'll be useful, wouldn't it? 16th of November, I think it's a Monday, isn't it? It's Monday the 16th of November.
Fantastic, excellent. So a bit more time to get those submissions in. And I know you referenced it there, Ryan, and I touched upon it earlier with the Tackling Inequalities Fund that Sporting had launched. I know that the incredible work that they're doing over there as well in trying to release more funding for community sport needs to be recognised. And obviously we know that they're always open to conversation and trying to support the best way they can. So it's great to have their support in the work we're doing. Hopefully, again, we can submit some evidence to government and show them actually the crisis that is facing the sector and how we can be supported. So please do get that submission in. If you need any help or advice, you can get in touch with our policy team at the Alliance via policy@sportandrecreation.org.uk. And you can follow everything in regards to the Save Our Sports campaign and have a look at our templates and toolkits and make sure you're sharing the same messages by following us at SportRecTweets. Well, that's it for this episode of the Westminster Roundup. Ryan and the policy team will be covering absolutely everything that's going on in Westminster during lockdown, and we'll make sure we keep all of our members updated with absolutely everything, and we'll be returning with another update very soon. Take care for now.